Hello, I am Were Mamu, the CEO of New Growth International, or NGI as we like to call ourselves. And on behalf of NGI, I am delighted to introduce our new food system index and food system typology, and the strategic priorities for food system strengthening and transformation that emerge from analysis with these new tools. I'll present some of the highlights in this video, but the full analysis is available on our website. The link to that is provided below, but you can also find this on LinkedIn and on Twitter. Now, the motivation for this work comes from what is happening in food systems at the moment. They're under enormous pressure due to climate change, economic shocks, in particular, those related to COVID-19, and conflict, including the war in Ukraine. And at issue are questions around the performance of food systems. How well are they doing? How well were they doing before the crises? And what needs to be put in place during these crises and for longer term strengthening of food systems. So that is what the index and typology try to do, establishing patterns of food system performance, and then also identifying strategies for strengthening and improving prospects for transformation. We think that the result is quite unique in terms of the set of performance rankings, benchmarks, and scorecards that can be identified for countries, and then also priorities for enhancing the performance of food systems. So first, let me introduce the index. Now, the 2022 version of the index has 8 indicators that cover all 4 of the components of food systems. So two indicators under production, 3 under markets and trade, 2 under consumption, and 1 under governance and institutions. 128 countries are included. And the index is developed for 2015 and 2020 so as to show changes, where 2020 is the year in which data, the most recent data, are available. These 128 countries fall into 4 broad categories of performance: very high, high, low, and very low. The full listing, the full rankings available in the analysis, but let me give you just some highlights. So the highest scoring, the best performer is Australia. The poorest performer is Yemen. Among high-income countries, of course, Australia is the best performer, but in that set, Malta is at the bottom, coming in 60th overall. Among upper middle-income countries, Kazakhstan comes out on top, and Lebanon is the lowest scoring among them. Among lower middle-income countries, Ukraine is the best performer, and DR Congo is the lowest in that group. Among low-income countries, Rwanda comes out on top at 77, and of course, Yemen is the lowest performing. And there's some other countries of interest given current affairs. The US is 5th, Russia is 23rd, China is 43rd, Brazil is 62nd, India 64th, Kenya, my home country, 78th, Nigeria 113th, and Ethiopia 117th. But again, the full listing is provided online. Now, when you look across those 4 performance categories and align the different regions of the world, you see that apart from North America, all the other regions can be found in most of the categories, with some such as Asia and the Pacific in all of them, but others are at least in 2 or 3. So there is this spread of across regions in terms of performance. And then also there's a spread across income groups in terms of performance. So we have the high income countries at the top end of the scale, and the low income countries at the bottom end, and then the middle income countries spread out between. Again, the details are provided in the in the analysis. When you look at changes between 2015 and 2020, some regions improved, some regions actually saw a deterioration in their food system. Again, the details are provided in the analysis. Across income groups, all groups except except the high income countries actually saw improvements in their food system. And again, the details are provided in the analysis. So that's the index. And what of the typology? Well, the rationale behind the typology is captured in this slide here, where you see 5 countries at very different levels of income: Rwanda, Kenya, Ecuador, Pakistan, and Bolivia, with very similar levels of food system performance. Clearly, it cannot be income which is defining this, because income is so different. What else might be happening? So that is what the typology tries to do. It aligns food system performance, that first column there, high and low, alongside the level of hunger as captured by IFPRI's Global Hunger Index, and also risk and instability as captured by the Informed Risk Index. So there's low, medium, high for each of these 2 additional measures. And then countries are placed according to their levels for each of these indicators. And what we find is, indeed, it is the case that income really is important. All the high income countries, these green bubbles, if you like, they are captured in the top left corner, where food system performance is high, the hunger burden is low, and risk and instability is low. Whereas low income countries are found in the bottom right-hand section of the matrix, where food system performance is low, the hunger burden is high, and risk and instability is moderate, medium, or high. Very interestingly, middle income countries are spread out across the matrix. So it's very clear that whereas income is definitely necessary for high food performance, high food system performance, actually it's not sufficient. Other things have got to come into play, and in particular, stability seems to matter quite a bit. Again, the details or further analysis, further details are provided in the analysis. The benchmarks. And here, this is one of the most interesting parts of the analysis, because it now gives us a way to assess the performance of food systems using the index and aligning this with the Global Hunger Index. And in particular, if we take a score of 9 for the Global Hunger Index, which IFPRI identifies as being associated with low hunger, and then see what levels of these other indicators are associated with that Global Hunger Index score of 9, we get this set of benchmark levels for each of the indicators. This now becomes a way for us to assess how well a given country's food system is doing. So when you put all this together, the index, the typology, and the benchmarks, what do we find? Well, we look at 6 countries that are selected based on the typology, based on insights emerging from the typology, where there seem to be 6 types of countries that one can identify that have combinations of these factors that are important. What we're calling underachieving upper middle income countries. So these are upper middle income countries that essentially have low food system performance. Overachieving lower middle income countries, so lower income countries that have high food system performance. What we're calling threatened lower middle income countries. So there's a large group here. These are lower middle income countries that have low food system performance, but also have relatively high risk or moderate to high risk and relatively high hunger levels. What we're calling surging lower income countries. These are low income countries that actually have either relatively low hunger compared to other low income countries, or moderate lower risk than other low-income countries. Then we have what we're calling straining low-income countries. These are low-income countries with very high, very low food system performance and very high risk. And then low-income countries in crises, very low. These are similar to the straining low-income countries, but even more lower food system performance and higher risk. And so this allows us to identify these different countries and put them into these different categories, and then also select our 6 focus countries: Ecuador, Vietnam, Kenya, Rwanda, Malawi, and Burkina Faso. Now this shows the country scorecards against the benchmarks for each of these 6 focus countries or 6 case countries. The green show where the countries are well above the benchmarks, the yellow where they're near the benchmarks, and the red for where they're well below the benchmarks. And the story that emerges is that whereas there are a number of countries, some of the countries, I should say, who have relatively good performance against the benchmarks, in each of the countries, there are areas in which they fall below. And in some of the countries, such as the straining low-income countries and the low-income countries in crisis, and even in the surging low-income countries, you can see that they're well below the benchmarks in every area. And then depending on the degree to which they are below the benchmarks, then the strategic priorities for investment emerge. And that is captured in the report. Just a word about Ukraine and just the food system perspective on that unfolding tragedy. And you can see that this overachieving low middle income country, the food system is indeed going to be devastated. All the hard work, all the investment that was put into pulling this country into this level of high performance could be at stake as that war unfolds. So what about the strategic priorities that emerge from this? The overall priorities for food system transformation. So over the longer term, the analysis suggests that there are a few areas that really need attention. First is to address this challenge of risk and instability, where the analysis suggests that there really is no pathway toward high food system performance in situations of high risk and instability. So that really needs to be addressed. It turns out that in many countries, there's a real slump or really sluggish productivity growth, especially when you compare it to the improvements in marketing and trade capacity. So there's a need for some catch-up or production with marketing and trade capacity. There is significant challenge around purchasing power linked to poverty, and then also nutrition linked to a number of factors, poor nutrition linked to other factors, and there's a need to address that. And then the progress on marketing and trade really has got to be kept up. That's been a big plus in recent years between 2015 and 2020, so that needs to continue. Looking shorter term, on factors that need to be taken into account as the current crisis unfolds, it's very clear that food price inflation is totally the #1 priority, and that this needs to be addressed very sharply. The transfers to vulnerable groups who are being affected by that, some of them cannot afford to operate in markets, to access food and nutrition on markets. So targeted transfers to them, ideally using the existing platforms. The private sector controls everything in food systems, and really it needs to be engaged so as to sustain the level of investment and the level of trade that we know is going to be required during recovery. Productivity cannot be allowed to slip any further. So even as these short-term measures are put in place, that investment in productivity growth has got to be enhanced. And similarly, continued investment in infrastructure and logistics capacity, which is a real bright light between 2015 and 2020, This has got to be sustained. It has immediate impacts in the short term, but also extremely important impacts over the longer term. So this is what the work yields. The full analysis is available on our website. That's the link there. And we are available for further information, tailored analysis, briefings, reports. Please contact us at that email address there. Thank you so much for taking the time to view the video. We very much look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.